You are standing in the cereal aisle of a supermarket. You are completely alone, nobody nearby, no one watching, and completely unprompted, out loud, to nobody in particular, you say, "Okay, where's the granola?" Not as a question, not to anyone, just to the air, to yourself, to the granola specifically. You have begun narrating your own life like a documentary nobody asked for and nobody is watching. And then, and this is the important part, it works. You find the granola faster than if you'd said nothing. Here's the thing, you do this constantly. When you're looking for your keys, when you're cooking and you mutter the steps out loud, when you mess something up and say out loud with real feeling, "Are you serious right now?" Addressing yourself in the second person, like you are simultaneously the disappointed person and the person being disappointed. And if anyone catches you doing it, your first instinct is embarrassment, because somewhere along the line, somebody told you that talking to yourself is weird. Here's what the science actually says. Talking to yourself is not a sign that something's wrong with you. It is one of the most sophisticated cognitive tools your brain has ever developed. And the people who do it most tend to be smarter, more focused, and better at solving problems. So the real question is, what is actually happening up there? Why does your brain keep doing this despite every social instinct telling you to stop? Let's find out. You've been doing this since you were a baby. To understand why adults talk to themselves, you have to go back to when you were about 3 years old, because children talk to themselves constantly, all the time, running commentary on everything. If you've spent time with a small child, you've seen it. They narrate their own existence in real time like a very small, very dramatic sports commentator. "I'm putting the block here. Now the blue one. The blue one is big." Okay, it fell. For a long time, scientists thought this was just random noise. Kids being kids. A phase they grow out of. Then in the 1930s, a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky came along and proposed something completely different. He argued that this out-loud self-narration wasn't random at all. It was actually the foundation of all higher thinking. Vygotsky's theory went like this. When children are very young, all their thinking is external. They have thoughts, but the only way they know how to process them is by saying them out loud. The speaking is the thinking. One and the same. As children get older, something interesting happens. The out-loud narration gradually becomes quieter, softer, more mumbled, and then it goes inward entirely, becoming what we call inner speech, the continuous internal monologue running inside your head basically every waking moment. But here's the key insight that Vygotsky got right. The inner speech you experience as an adult is not a replacement for out-loud self-talk. It is a compressed, internalized version of it. And sometimes, when the task is hard enough, your brain kicks the thinking back outside, into actual words, into actual sound. Which means, when you mutter to yourself while assembling furniture at 11 p.m., you are not regressing. You are doing exactly what your brain has been designed to do since you were 3 years old. You are thinking out loud because the problem is hard enough that thinking quietly isn't enough. A study found that verbalizing material out loud helped people remember it significantly more effectively. Psychologist Gary Lupien ran an experiment where volunteers searched for objects in a supermarket. Half repeated the object name out loud, half stayed silent. The ones who talked to themselves found the objects 50 to 100 milliseconds faster. You say granola out loud, and your brain snaps to attention like a search engine receiving a query. You stay silent and your brain is doing a vague, unfocused scroll. Your mouth is functionally helping your eyes. The 3 types of self-talk. Not all self-talk is the same. Researchers have identified several distinct categories, and you almost certainly do at least 2 of them. Type 1. Instructional self-talk. This is the granola situation, the furniture situation, the cooking situation. You are narrating the steps of a task out loud to keep yourself on track. Okay, first I need to, now I turn this piece, wait, that goes the other way. Research on basketball players found that athletes who use instructional self-talk made fewer errors. Your mouth is an excellent coach, even when the only player listening is you. Type 2, motivational self-talk. This is when you say things like, "Come on, you can do," or, and this one is important, you refer to yourself in the third person. Research has found that talking to yourself in the third person is measurably more effective. Why? Because it creates a tiny psychological distance between you and the problem. It activates the same mental processes you'd use to give advice to a friend. And most of us are dramatically better at giving advice to friends than to ourselves. LeBron James talks to himself in the third person before games. This has been documented, not because he is trained, because it works. and the research says so. Type 3. Emotional processing self-talk. This is when something frustrating or upsetting happens, and you work through it out loud, alone, in your car, in the shower, on a long walk. You replay the conversation. You say what you should have said. Research shows that verbalizing an emotional experience out loud helps the brain label and categorize the emotion, and labeled emotions are significantly easier to regulate than unlabeled. Your brain, confronted with a strong emotion, essentially experiences a traffic. Speaking the emotion out loud is like a traffic controller stepping in and directing things. The talking doesn't just express the feeling, it helps you understand it. The inner monologue situation. Here is something that will either confirm what you suspected or absolutely shatter your understanding of other humans. Not everyone has an inner monologue. This fact, when widely discussed online, caused a genuine crisis for many people, who discovered, usually in their mid-20s, that other people actually hear a running verbal commentary in their heads all day. Not a vague sense of thinking, actual words, actual sentences, a voice. Some people don't have this, or have it very rarely, or experience their thoughts entirely as images, feelings, or abstract concepts with no verbal component at all. Inner speech sits on a spectrum. On one end, people with near constant verbal inner speech. Their thoughts are basically a continuous internal podcast. On the other end, people with almost no verbal inner speech whatsoever. And here is where it connects back to out loud self-talk. People who have strong inner speech tend to externalize it less often because they already have an efficient verbal processing system running internally. People who have weaker inner speech tend to talk to themselves out loud more, because for them, the verbal processing genuinely needs to happen externally. Your mouth might be compensating for what your inner voice is or isn't doing, which is somehow both obvious and deeply strange to think about. When self-talk goes wrong, here's the part nobody includes in the inspiring articles about talking to yourself making you a genius. Not all self-talk is helpful. Some of it is quietly destroying you. When you say negative things to yourself repeatedly, I'm so stupid. Why do I always do this? Your brain processes these statements as factual, as accurate assessments of reality. It does not flag them as exaggerated. It does not apply a critical filter. The brain trusts your own voice more than any other source of information. This means when the internal voice runs negative commentary, the brain believes it. Chronic negative self-talk has been linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and lower performance, not because the people experiencing it are weak, but because they are receiving a continuous stream of discouraging information from the most trusted source their brain has. Cognitive behavioral therapy is largely built around identifying and interrupting negative self-talk. The core idea: if you can change what you say to yourself, you can change what your brain believes. People who said, "I will do well on this" before a test performed better than those who said, "Will I do well?" The declaration outperformed the question. Telling yourself you can do something works better than asking yourself if you can. Your internal voice is not an observer. It is a part. It is actively shaping the outcome of everything you do. Self-talk across history. Talking to yourself is ancient, and it has been considered across most of human history not embarrassing, but essential. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome built entire practices around deliberate, self-directed speech. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is literally a collection of things he wrote to himself. Notes, reminders, instructions, self-coaching memos from a Roman emperor to himself. He wasn't embarrassed about it. He was the most powerful person on earth, and he talked to himself constantly. Indigenous oral traditions across many cultures include speaking intentions and plans aloud, not as superstition, but as a practical recognition that language does something thought alone does not. Even in modern elite performance contexts, out-loud self-talk is standard. Athletes use it. Surgeons talk themselves through complex procedures out loud. Pilots narrate checklists verbally, even when they have them memorized. Astronauts on spacewalks talk through every step out loud as a safety protocol. The embarrassment around self-talk is not ancient. It is relatively recent, tied to modern Western norms about what normal cognitive behavior looks like in public. For most of human history, thinking out loud was just thinking. So, why do you talk to yourself? Because your brain learned to think in words when you were 3 years old, and sometimes it still needs to hear those words out loud to function at full capacity. Because verbal self-instruction improves focus, memory, and performance in ways silent thought cannot always match. Because the third-person pep talk activates a more rational version of your decision-making. Because processing experiences verbally helps your brain categorize emotions that would otherwise pile up. Because for some people, the inner voice needs external help to function properly. And because for most of human history, the most effective thinkers considered out-loud self-talk a tool, not an embarrassment. The granola thing? Completely normal. Scientifically validated. Measurably effective. The furniture assembly at 11 p.m. where you narrate every step and address the instruction manual directly? Also completely normal. Though the instruction manual genuinely cannot hear you. Probably. Next time someone catches you talking to yourself and gives you a look, feel free to explain that you are engaging in externalized verbal cognitive processing, practiced by Roman emperors, elite athletes, surgeons, astronauts, and LeBron James. Or just say you were talking to the granola. Either works.